On this day in 1995, the world lost the honorary fifth member of the band Led Zeppelin, whose revolutionary business practices probably would have had a problem today. Even with Jimmy Page's searing guitar vocals, Robert Plant's wailing vocals, and John Bonham's and John Paul Jones's just driving rhythm section, one could reasonably argue that without the honorary fifth member of Led Zeppelin, Peter Grant, there would have been no Led Zeppelin. In fact, there's a good chance that the band that would become Led Zeppelin would still be touring and likely disbanding as the New Yardbirds. That's when Grant changed it all. This towering, impressive figure of a man went from working in a sheet metal factory to dipping his toes into the entertainment industry with small film roles as commandos, guards, and other castings that called for a man of his size and stature. By the early 1960s, Grant was managing acts like the Everly Brothers, Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and in 1966, he turned his sights toward the Yardbirds. And after the band split in 1969, he followed former Yardbirds member Jimmy Page into his new project, the New Yardbirds, which of course would later become Zeppelin. Aside from the music itself, Grant was largely responsible for Led Zeppelin's financial and cultural success. And interestingly enough, though most of his business practices would falter today, despite being somewhat revolutionary 60 years ago. Musicians have notoriously gotten the fuzzy end of the lollipop when it comes to business dealings, and that was certainly true in the late 1960s when Led Zeppelin and the rest of Peter Grant's clients were basically cutting their teeth. Led Zeppelin's manager renegotiated contracts with venues so that the band got paid better for their live performances. At the same time, he prioritized those live performances over TV performances so that if people wanted to hear Zeppelin, they had to buy a ticket. Grant also opted not to release Led Zeppelin's hits as singles to encourage consumption of entire albums. It was good business for the band and Grant alike, who all split the profits from all of these dealings evenly 5 ways. John Paul Jones, the bassist, once said, "Grant trusted us to get the music together and then just kept everybody else away, making sure we had the space to do whatever we wanted without interference from anybody. Press, record company, promoters. He only had us as clients and reckoned that if we were going to do good, then he would do good. He always believed that we would likely be hugely successful, and people became afraid not to go along with his terms in case they missed out. But all that stuff about renegotiating contracts through intimidation is rubbish. He wasn't hanging people out of windows and all that crap. Peter Grant may not have been hanging people outside of windows, technically, but he was still a force to be reckoned with, and industry veterans knew that. Sure, he was physically intimidating from his height and weight alone. He used to be a bouncer in his early days, but Grant wasn't afraid to get physical when he needed to, and he would famously shake down record shop owners selling bootlegs and destroy what he believed to be recording equipment at shows to protect the band's music from leaking without their consent or adequate compensation, even when that recording equipment was actually equipment that could detect noise pollution. As Grant himself said, "I don't believe in pussyfooting around. That's what Led Zeppelin hired me for. But as a supposed archetypal heavy, most of these incidents have been on-the-spot situations, not the result of me sitting in office and hiring a crew of heavies to go round. Let me put it this way. I would step on anyone who f***ed around with my band personally. I would have never sent in a heavy. I'd deal with it myself, just as I would go to any lengths to get the band the money they were due." In today's world of brevity and online availability, it's hard to imagine Grant's business practices would be as successful, of course, and his ethic of putting bands in front of audiences, paying them fairly, and getting consumers to buy whole concept albums came just at the right time in rock and roll history. Any sooner or later, and the whole thing Led Zeppelin might not have worked. Grant died of a heart attack while driving on November 21st, 1995, 30 years ago this week. He was only 60 years old.